Welcome to The Source, where we combine the headlines with in-depth conversations with the newsmakers themselves. I'm Pinky Webb. Today on the program, the Commission on Elections begins its series of debates with back-to-back presidential and vice presidential face-offs over the weekend. Unity versus UniTeam. VP Rizalito David calls on his fellow candidates to band together to beat the Marcos-Duterte tandem. And at least 4 presidential candidates agree that Bongbong Marcos and his family should pay their tax liabilities. Political analyst Maria Ela Atienza and Aksyon Demokratiko Chairman Ernest Ramel join us live. Presidential contenders may have different positions on issues hounding the country, but at least for one night during Saturday's debate, most of them were one in saying the government should go after billions in unpaid estate taxes of the Marcoses.
Yung isang pamilyang may utang ng 203 billion na estate tax, sisiguraduhin natin, sisingilin ko yun, kukunin ko yung 200 billion na yun, ibibigay ko sa magsasaka, ibibigay ko sa driver bilang ayuda.
Sang-ayon din ako pare. Train 1, Train 2, ang dami, 101 billion. Eh meron 203 billion nga na sisingilin lamang na andyan na, bakit ay singilin ng biyaya?
Pag nasingil natin ito, hindi na natin kailangan tipirin yung ating mga kababayan.
Meantime, on Sunday, the first COMELEC vice presidential debate opened with candidates clashing on the concept of tandem voting.
Ang boto sa presidente, dapat yun din ang boto sa vice-presidente para nagtutulungan.
Kaya pag hindi mag-partner, hindi ko alam kung paano sila magtatrabaho.
Pero okay na rin kung hindi. No? Maganda nga na merong konting check and balance.
COMELEC's next presidential debate is set for April 3, followed by another back-to-back presidential and vice presidential face-off on April 23 and 24. Let's go straight to the source of the story. First off, political analyst and Professor Maria Ela Atienza. Professor Atienza, welcome to the source. Thank you so much for your time.
Hello, Pinky. Good morning to everyone.
All right, good morning. The COMELEC presidential and vice presidential debate, as mentioned a while ago, was held over the weekend. But of course, this is the second time that the presidential and vice presidential candidates stood side by side on one stage, the CNN Philippines debate being the first one. Let's first discuss the presidential debate. Who stood out for you and why?
Okay. Who stood out during the presidential debates? VP Lenny and Senator Lacson had a lot of data. They discussed a lot of data to back up their positions on issues. Mayor Isko and Manny Pacquiao seem to have prepared more, and they were eager to actually punch certain opponents or discuss a lot of issues. Of course, Calyodi brings in the pro-labor socialist agenda in the debate.
But I want to just compare the first presidential debate to the second presidential debate. Did you see any improvement in any of the candidates?
In terms of improvement, I think in this particular case, VP Lenny, aside from her data-driven analysis and presentation of issues, also included slight digs against particularly former Senator Bongbong Marcos, but at the same time also she was also able to link her specific programs with the importance of empowering the people. So I think she has improved in terms of bringing in issues, data, as well as getting connected with the people. In terms, I would have wanted Calyodi de Guzman to actually put more details into many of their proposals, including the wealth tax. But I guess given the available time, there was not enough time to elaborate, but that was a missed opportunity. I think Manny Pacquiao continues to improve, and it shows that he is also serious because he's also trying to discuss economic issues.
But I just want to interrupt you there. When you were talking about Vice President Leni Robredo taking a dig, if I'm not mistaken, the person who really took a dig, especially on the topic of the estate taxes, was Mayor Isko Moreno.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, of course. Mayor Isko took a dig on the estate tax because that was one of the issues that they were actually asking BIR to clarify. But I think in terms of the issues questions regarding social media, misinformation, and also the fact of not being present and not showing up, the characteristics of a president as a crisis president and being always present, VP Robredo was able to bring in issues related to her capacities and her track record, with at the same time also talking about why former Senator Bongbong Marcos is not a candidate with the capabilities to be president because he's not present.
Let's talk about the economy. I believe this was one of the first question that was asked among the presidential candidates. Which sector do they think it should be recovered first? I remember a number of them said it's the agricultural sector, but there were two, because I was thinking of if somebody would mention MSMEs. And Senator Ping Lacson mentioned this, and also Vice President Leni Robredo. And again, as for context, the others talked about agriculture, obviously food, and the like. But who among them, on the first question, because sometimes this sets the tone of the debate, who among them you think gave the most convincing answer to which sector should be prioritized first to spur economic growth or to take care of the economy?
Yes. I think while agriculture, of course, is related to food security, and that's a very important sector, Senator Lacson and Vice President Robredo were very clear in terms of showing that based on statistics, SMNEs was the actual sector that was the most heavily affected, and that's important to actually address them. Although, of course, second to that would be agriculture. So in terms of convincing answers to addressing these economic problems in these sectors, I think in the case of Senator Lacson, he included the importance of agricultural cooperatives and also allotting funds in the GAA, and he wants to continue that. Mayor Isko actually focused on improving the farmers' conditions and including investment in post-harvest facilities, as well as lowering the prices of agricultural supplies needed by the farmers. And of course, in the case of VP Leni, he discussed the 100 billion stimulus fund, conditional cash grants, and capacity building for SMNEs.
You mentioned a while ago about fake news. Every candidate said that social media platforms should be held liable for spreading disinformation. But I want to talk about what you were saying a while ago when we were talking about the economy. One of the topics also that came out even during the start of our discussion was the estate taxes. Si Mayor Isko Moreno's Action Democratic was the one who really asked the BIR, questioned this, kung they have sent any demand letter to the Marcoses to pay the estate taxes. So everybody agreed that this should be collected, and they had various ways of how to actually disperse this, dispense of this. For example, Isko was saying, give to commuters and farmers. Yun po sabi niya. Sabi ni Senator Ping Lacson, bakit ayaw singilin ng BIR? Nagtanong na po siya. Mangundato answered, he said, let's get rid of the old system. But VP Lenny said, kung masingil, ito, hindi na kailangan tipirin pa ang publiko when we're talking about the ayuda right now because of the rising fuel prices. How did this look to you when it started from Mayor Isko, seconded by Calyodi, and then Senator Ping Lacson chimed in, and then Vice President Lenny Robredo as well?
Well, at least on that particular issue, there is an agreement among four candidates on the need to actually for the BIR to run after the Marcoses and pay this estate tax, because this is a very huge amount, and definitely this can be used for the current ayuda for drivers and those affected by rising oil prices, as well as, of course, pump priming our economy. So in that sense, there's a general agreement about the issue in terms of the need to get the Marcoses to pay for the estate tax.
We also need to talk about the vice presidential debate, but we'll be taking a very short break. This is The Source on CNN Philippines. Please stay tuned. You're watching The Source on CNN Philippines. Our guest today, political analyst Ela Atienza. Let's briefly talk about the vice presidential debate. But let me start with Walden Bello. He basically threatened to walk out of that debate because of the no-show or the absence of Mayor Sara Duterte. And he basically said, if you don't show up, the COMELEC was saying, you will not be allowed, you will be banned on the COMELEC e-rallies. And maybe to some, this is just not good enough. It's too minor of a penalty. What did you think about Walden Bello's statement? And should there be stiffer penalties, perhaps, for those who do not attend debates?
Yeah, thank you, Pinky. That's the highlight, actually, of the vice presidential debate. I expected Professor Walden Bello to discuss that and go after the absence of Sara Duterte and also Bongbong Marcos during the presidential debates. I do agree that there should be stricter penalties for candidates who do not show up. Particularly in this case, this is the first debate sponsored by COMELEC. COMELEC, of course, is a constitutional body. I understand that, of course, in the Philippines, debates during elections are not as institutionalized as in other countries like the U.S., but perhaps it's time to really to have all candidates take seriously these debates, and there should be debates where they should also show up, and there should actually be stricter penalties instead of not being allowed to participate in the e-rallies of COMELEC.
Okay, just one more point I'd like to raise during the vice presidential debate. Tandem voting seems to be more talked about now than before, although there were some different answers, such as Senate President Tito Soto saying that kung siya, pwede niyang gawing Senate President or officer Senate President ang Vice President, no? But a lot of them were encouraged really to look into tandem voting with perceptions or statements like this by candidates. Do you think this will encourage maybe even the politicians to start pushing for tandem voting in the next elections?
Yeah, I think it's important to highlight that, because we're seeing, at least we have politicians who are actually thinking about the need to have tandem voting for president and vice president. And perhaps this can be tied up further with having more electoral reforms that will target strengthening of political parties and punishing turncoats.
All right. So who stood out for you as the last question during the vice presidential debate?
Vice presidential debates, of course, Walden Bello was the disruptor. But I think in terms of comprehensiveness in presentation of issues and supporting his presidential candidate, it would be Senator Kiko
Pangilinan,
Pangilinan, and then of course some of the other candidates stood out, but only on specific questions like of course Dr. Willie Ong when it comes to the pandemic, and of course the others have their own advocacies, but in a way they are compartmentalized by the issues that they favor.
Political analyst Ela Atienza, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you also. You're welcome.
And coming up, a number of presidential contenders agree that government should recover the unpaid estate taxes of the Marcos family. Acción Democrático Chairman Ernest Romel joins us next. Please stay tuned.